There are mornings in the countryside that feel as if the world itself is holding its breath, heavy with secrets. This was one of those mornings. A thick mist clung to the rolling hills of the old Cotswolds, swirling around a run-down horse farm that had seen better days. Decades ago, maybe. The wooden fences leaned at odd angles, eaten by rot. The farmhouse, barely holding itself together, loomed like a ghost through the haze. But it wasn't the sight of decay that hit hardest. It was the sound. Crack. The sharp report of a whip sliced through the dawn. Birds scattered from the mossy eaves, their wings beating frantic warnings. Inside the main barn, the air was choked with the stink of mildew, horse manure, and something darker, fear. In the farthest stall, Storm, a Clydesdale gelding who should have been a giant of his kind, pressed his trembling body against the splintered wall. His ribs stood out like the slats of an old fence. His coat, once meant to gleam like polished chestnut, was now dulled, crusted with dried mud and blood. His mane hung in matted clumps, his eyes rolling white with panic at every movement. Another lash, another crack, and Storm cringed, nostrils flaring as he tried to make himself invisible. "You worthless beast! You think you can stand there all day, eatin', shittin', doin' nothin'?" Mr. Davies's voice thundered, twisted by rage and old disappointments. He was a man of the land, weather-beaten, his hands thick and red from years of labor. But his eyes, set deep beneath wiry gray brows, held none of the softness that sometimes comes with age. In his right hand, the crop flicked up and down with practiced cruelty. Storm shrank into the darkest corner, hooves scraping against dirty straw, heart pounding so hard it shook his frame. The whip cracked again, too close this time. His legs locked, muscles quivering. "Move, damn you!" But Storm didn't move. He froze, breath coming in short, choppy bursts. In that moment, something inside him snapped. Maybe it was the sting of hunger, or the ache of old wounds, or just the last straw on a mountain of misery. He lunged. With a desperate kick, Storm's back leg shot out, catching Mr. Davies square in the thigh. The old man cried out, an animal sound, both furious and shocked, and stumbled backwards, dropping the whip. Storm's eyes went wild, his entire body trembling, unsure if he'd made things better or 1,000 times worse. There was a beat of stunned silence, the world holding its breath again. Then, with a groan, Davies hauled himself upright, his face twisted in pain and humiliation. "You'll pay for that. You think you're clever, huh? I've had enough." He slammed the stall door, the echo ringing through the barn. Storm collapsed against the boards, legs folding underneath him as the last of his adrenaline faded. He didn't know what came next, only that it would hurt. He tucked his head, waiting for the next blow. But it didn't come, not right away. Instead, through the thin walls, Storm heard the scrape of boots, the slam of a heavy door, and then the low grumble of Mr. Davies' voice on the phone. "Hello? Yes, I need this horse gone. Today, if possible. Either someone buys him, or he's off to the knacker's yard by morning. I'm done." Storm's heart thudded with dread, but there was nothing left in him to fight. He had been beaten, starved, shut away for months on end, sometimes left without water, always alone. Other horses had come and gone, their fates unknown, but Storm was the last, and even the crows seemed to know his story was almost over. Outside, the mist began to thin, the weak sun trying to push through. It lit up the battered sign at the farm's gate. Davies and Sons, Clydesdale breeders. The words meant nothing now. No sons came to help, no horses left to breed, just a single, terrified animal and a man too bitter to see the value in anything anymore. Inside, Storm shivered, haunted by the echo of hooves on cold concrete, the memory of freedom replaced by years of fear. Yet somewhere deep beneath the bruises and the hunger, a spark remained, a raw instinct that refused to die. He tried to stand, legs shaking so badly he nearly fell again. There was no point. The straw beneath him was wet and sour. The air hung heavy with threats. Storm closed his eyes, the world spinning, as if the barn itself was breathing in time with his fear. "If no one wants you, I'll be rid of you tomorrow. You hear me?" Davy's voice was a rumble, more to himself than to the horse. But Storm heard every word. He didn't understand the meaning, not exactly, but the tone was clear enough. Hours crawled by. Storm dozed, haunted by nightmares of rope and pain, only to wake at every sound, the caw of a crow, the groan of a loose hinge, his own heartbeat thrumming in his ears. No one came to comfort him. There was no gentle hand, no kind words, just the certainty that by tomorrow, everything could end. Then, as the afternoon sun finally burned through the fog, another sound drifted in, a different voice, muffled and distant, but not like Davy's. A woman, young, uncertain. She was reading through listings on her phone, searching for something. Her eyes stopped at a headline. "Urgent. Clydesdale gelding, rescue only, needs rehoming or will be destroyed." Her name was Eleanor Vance. In that moment, neither Storm nor Eleanor could know that their lives were about to collide, changing everything. But fate had a way of working quietly, like the sun melting away the mist, revealing the shape of hope beneath even the darkest mornings. The next morning, Yorkshire was bathed in a soft, golden light. Sunbeams broke through the clouds and poured across Eleanor Vance's kitchen table, illuminating the half-finished crossword next to her favorite mug. She sat curled in a patch of sunlight, one hand around a steaming cup of Earl Grey, the other scrolling through her phone. Normally, these peaceful mornings were her refuge, but today, something gnawed at her. She couldn't focus on her crossword. She barely tasted her tea. Her thumb hovered over the image that had haunted her dreams all night, a blurry, grainy photo of a gaunt Clydesdale, standing alone in a filthy stall. "Urgent. Clydesdale gelding, rescue only, needs rehoming or will be destroyed." Just reading those words again sent a cold jolt down her spine. Eleanor had seen hundreds of rescue cases over the years. Some were heartbreaking, others frustrating. But there was something about this one that reached straight through the screen and grabbed her. It wasn't just the jutting bones or the hollow eyes. It was the posture. How this massive animal tried to shrink himself into the shadows, as if he could will himself invisible. She found herself whispering, "I can't let this one go." The clock on the wall ticked. She looked up, taking a shaky breath. In her mind, she replayed the dozens of times she'd answered calls like this, sometimes too late, sometimes just in time. But this time felt different. She tapped the phone number in the listing, her finger trembling. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. "Yeah, Davy's here." The voice was rough, impatient. Eleanor schooled her tone, keeping it steady and professional. "Good morning, Mr. Davies. My name is Eleanor Vance. I run Havenwood Stables, a rescue center in Yorkshire. I saw your listing about the Clydesdale gelding." She heard a long exhale. Davies's tone hardened. "You want him or not? I'm sick of waiting around for bleeding hearts. I'd like to come see him if that's all right. Today, if possible." A pause. She imagined Davies glancing out his window at Storm, calculating if she was worth the trouble. "Fine, come quick, and bring a trailer if you want him. I'm done with him after today." The call ended with a click. Eleanor stared at her phone. She felt a surge of nerves. These visits could go any number of ways. Sometimes the animal was beyond help. Sometimes the owner changed their mind. But she couldn't shake the certainty growing in her chest. Storm needed her. She packed quickly, grabbing her rescue kit, a notebook, some apples, and a thick blanket. She texted her friend and longtime colleague, Dr. Anya Sharma, a veterinarian and equine behavior specialist. "Emergency run, Cotswolds, possible severe neglect. Can you meet me there?" "E!" The reply came instantly. "On my way. ETA 2 HRs. Eleanor loaded up her battered truck and horse trailer, heart hammering as she pulled onto the highway, fields blurring past. The drive felt endless. Her mind ran wild with worry, every possible scenario looping in her head. She pictured Storm's eyes, how lost they looked. She remembered other rescues, some where the animal didn't make it, some that ended in hope. Which would this be? Finally, she turned off the main road, gravel crunching beneath her tires as she rolled up to Davies's rundown property. The place looked worse in daylight, paint peeling, paddocks overgrown, the air thick with the stench of neglect. She could hear crows cawing, restless in the treetops. The barn door was half open, creaking in the breeze. Davies met her at the gate, face lined with irritation. "He's in the last stall, good luck." He didn't offer to help. He didn't even look her in the eye. Eleanor walked toward the barn, her boots squelching in the mud. The air grew colder the deeper she went, as if the walls themselves tried to warn her away. And there was Storm. He stood in the far corner, body pressed so hard against the boards, it looked like he'd become part of the wood. Up close, the sight was worse than the photo. His coat was a patchwork of scars and bare skin. Flies circled his legs. When Eleanor stepped forward, Storm shuddered violently, his whole body shaking. She didn't move any closer. She just knelt, keeping her posture small and unthreatening. "Hey there, boy. It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." Storm didn't believe her. He flinched every time her voice echoed. She could see how hungry he was, how his ribs seemed to slice through his skin, how he licked at empty air, desperate for comfort. But he made no sound. Just stood, braced for the worst. Eleanor's throat tightened. She took out a small piece of apple and set it gently on the ground, not daring to get too close. Storm watched her, every muscle rigid. He didn't move. After a minute, she stood and backed away, keeping her gaze low, fighting back tears. She heard Davies mutter behind her. "He hasn't eaten much in days. Don't know what's wrong with him. He was never right in the head. Can't sell him. Can't use him. Waste of good feed." Eleanor bit her tongue. She'd heard this before. Resentment, blame, the hard edge of people who lost patience long ago. But she couldn't let anger win. Not now. "My colleague will be here soon, Mr. Davies. May we take a look at him together?" Davies shrugged and stomped away, grumbling. For a while, Eleanor just stood in the barn, breathing in the quiet. She studied the stall, mold on the walls, buckets crusted with old food, barely any bedding. It was a miracle Storm was still alive. Soon, headlights flickered at the gate. Dr. Anya Sharma swept in, dark hair pulled back, her face serious but kind. She carried her vet bag, eyes sharp as she assessed the situation. "Eleanor, this is bad. Let's see what we can do." Anya moved slowly, speaking softly to Storm as she approached. She checked his eyes, his teeth, his wounds, always from a distance, careful not to startle him. She took notes, her brow furrowed. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple untreated injuries, probably from self-harm or trying to escape. But what worries me most is his mind. Anya glanced at Eleanor, voice low. I've seen this before. He's got trauma, deep, maybe unfixable. This is textbook PTSD. He's terrified of people, of noises, even of his own shadow. We can heal his body, but his mind, that's going to take everything we've got. Eleanor nodded, feeling the weight settle on her shoulders. She watched as Storm finally, cautiously sniffed the apple she'd left earlier. He nudged it, then took the tiniest bite, as if unsure whether kindness could be real. That single gesture, a starving horse risking a taste, felt monumental. Anya finished her exam, turning to Eleanor. He's got a chance. But it's going to be hard. Horses like this, they never really forget. It's a long road. Are you sure you're ready? Eleanor met her friend's gaze. I'm ready. Whatever it takes. Davies wandered back, arms crossed. You taking him or not? I want him off my property. Eleanor stepped forward, voice steady. We'll take him. I'll sign the paperwork now. Davies didn't ask for much, just enough to cover a bag of feed. He scrawled his signature, handed her a grimy lead rope, and walked away without a backward glance. Together, Eleanor and Anya coaxed Storm into the trailer, moving slow, patient, gentle. It took nearly an hour. Storm balked at every sound, every shadow. But finally, he stepped inside, shaking but upright. Eleanor wrapped him in the thick blanket, her hand on his shoulder. You're safe now. I promise. The drive home was quiet, filled with hope and fear in equal measure. As they rolled toward Havenwood Stables, Eleanor couldn't help but wonder what the next day would bring. She knew this was only the beginning. But for the first time, Storm was on the road to something new, a place where cruelty ended and healing could begin. The gates of Havenwood Stables creaked open under the silver-blue twilight, lanterns casting soft pools of light over the neat gravel drive. Eleanor's battered truck crawled forward, the horse trailer in tow. Anya jogged ahead, opening the barn doors wide. A gentle breeze carried the scents of fresh hay, lavender, and a hint of rain. This was home, a place where every horse had a name, and every scar was treated with respect. Storm, tense and exhausted, peered out from the darkness of the trailer. Eleanor didn't rush. She took her time, letting the silence work its magic. She spoke in low tones, her hand warm on Storm's trembling neck. It's okay, boy. You're safe. Just a few more steps. He hesitated, nostrils quivering at the unfamiliar scents. The world outside the trailer was both terrifying and new. Rows of tidy stalls, each painted with a cheerful sign: Belle, Chester, Willow. Gentle wickers floated on the air as the resident horses greeted the newcomer. Some pressed their muzzles to the bars, curious and friendly. Others, like the old pony Clover, simply flicked an ear, wise to the comings and goings of rescue life. Storm's first step onto the barn floor was tentative, shaky. He nearly slipped, legs trembling beneath his weight. Eleanor braced him, whispering encouragement. Every movement was slow, deliberate, an act of trust, a ritual of patience. Anya walked ahead, holding the stall door open, her voice calm. You're home, Storm. This one's just for you. Inside, the stall was bright and clean, thick with fresh shavings and a pile of fragrant hay. A bucket of cool water sat within reach, along with a new salt lick. The name Storm was already written in careful block letters on a little wooden plaque, hung at eye level. Eleanor watched as Storm took it all in. The safety, the order, the quiet presence of kindness. He backed into a corner, wide eyes flicking from shadow to shadow. His muscles remained tight, ears pinned, but Eleanor noticed a subtle change. No whip cracked in the air. No angry voices boomed. The barn was quiet except for the gentle hum of life, the shift of hooves, a distant owl calling outside, and Eleanor's voice reading softly from a well-worn book as she settled on a hay bale nearby. She read aloud every night. Sometimes it was Austen, other times Wordsworth or Frost. The words weren't for her. They were for Storm, whose body was still a map of old pain and fear. That first night, Storm did not eat. He stood rigid in the corner, flinching at every creak or whisper. Eleanor remained nearby, her presence a gentle reassurance. She watched him for hours, stifling yawns, unwilling to leave him alone in this new world. Every so often, she would hum, a tune her grandmother used to sing. The melody mingled with the barn's nighttime sounds, forming a lullaby of sorts. By dawn, something miraculous happened. Storm, starving but cautious, edged toward the hay. He sniffed, then with a shudder, took a tentative mouthful. His jaws worked slowly, as if he'd forgotten what it meant to eat without fear. Eleanor watched, heart swelling. It was a tiny victory, a crack of light in a world that had been shut tight. That morning, the staff arrived. Owen, the teenage stable hand with freckles and a shy grin. Lisa, the volunteer who adored every animal. And Mrs. Bright, the no-nonsense barn manager whose hands were rough but whose eyes never missed a thing. Each of them gave Storm space, respecting Eleanor's warning, no sudden moves, no loud voices. Owen cleaned the aisle, quietly humming along to the radio. Lisa worked in the tack room, peeking out now and then to check on Storm. Mrs. Bright brought extra hay and a pail of fresh apples. "No horse says no to apples," she declared, setting them gently by the door. Still, Storm remained wary, every muscle ready to flee. When Eleanor entered the stall that afternoon, she moved with exaggerated slowness, showing her empty hands. She sat cross-legged on the shavings, reading in a low, even tone. By the end of the chapter, Storm had moved half a step closer, drawn by the strange comfort of her voice. That evening, a thunderstorm rolled in. Clouds heavy with rain, thunder rattling the old barn roof. The other horses stamped and snorted, but Storm stood frozen, sweat beading along his flanks. Eleanor sat outside his stall, reading and humming until the storm passed. At one point, Storm pressed his nose to the bars, inches from her hand. "Easy, boy. I'm right here." She didn't reach for him, just let him come as close as he dared. The days passed in a steady, hopeful rhythm. Eleanor set a routine, gentle greetings, slow approach, offering treats but never forcing contact. She always ended her day in the same way, sitting by Storm's stall, reading, or simply being present. Sometimes she'd drift off, head against the wall, comforted by the sound of horses chewing, the safe warmth of the barn. Storm watched her constantly. Sometimes he would stand for hours, eyes never leaving her. He seemed to be weighing every move, every word, every breath. By the third evening, as she read a poem about summer fields, Storm inched forward, stretching his neck. Eleanor felt his warm breath on her fingers. He nudged her hand, searching. She held out a small piece of apple. This time, Storm took it, his lips brushing her palm. He chewed slowly, eyes never leaving hers. For the first time, Eleanor saw a flicker of something in those eyes, a glint of curiosity, a question. "Good boy," she whispered, her heart thumping in her chest. That moment, small, almost invisible, meant everything. It was proof that the wall between them, built by years of pain and fear, could be chipped away. The next day, Storm ate more hay, drank deeply, and even dozed for a while, head low, finally able to let his guard down. Anya stopped by for another checkup, smiling at the change. "He's looking better already," she murmured, voice filled with hope. "You're working magic, Eleanor." "Not magic, just patience, and maybe a little poetry." Soon, Eleanor began reading aloud every evening, sometimes inviting Owen or Lisa to join. Storm started to relax at the sound of laughter, of gentle conversation. He even began to watch the other horses, his ears swiveling as they snorted and played. But healing was not a straight line. Some nights, Storm paced the stall until dawn, too restless to sleep. Some days he would stand shaking for hours, staring at shadows only he could see. Yet Eleanor never gave up. She matched every setback with double the patience, every fear with an extra measure of kindness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line and painted the paddocks gold, Eleanor opened Storm's stall and stepped inside. She carried no food, no book, only herself. She sat on the ground, legs folded, and waited. After a long, trembling pause, Storm took a step forward, then another. He lowered his head and gently, hesitantly, brushed his nose against her hand. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the moment stretch between them, a bridge built from hope and trust. From the barn door, Anya watched, her heart in her throat. Owen grinned. Lisa wiped her eyes. Even Mrs. Bright nodded in silent approval. It wasn't much, just a touch. But for Storm, it was everything. And for the first time, as dusk settled over Havenwood Stables, Eleanor allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, hope could take root in even the most broken places. Sunrise filtered through the tall oaks that lined Havenwood Stables, painting the paddocks in a mosaic of gold and green. The air was brisk, fresh with dew, carrying the promise of new beginnings. Inside the barn, life was already stirring. Owen whistling as he mucked out stalls, Lisa gently brushing a sleepy pony, and Mrs. Bright making her rounds, clipboard in hand. Eleanor lingered by Storm's stall, watching him as he stood alert but calmer than he'd been days ago. For Storm, the world outside was a mystery. The other horses, some old friends, some fresh arrivals, came and went, nickering, tossing their heads, rolling in the grass. Storm watched with wide, wary eyes, his breath fogging in the morning chill. Eleanor saw that curiosity flicker beneath his caution. She waited, patient as ever. Today, Eleanor had something new planned. She opened Storm's stall, moving with her now familiar slowness, and clipped a soft cotton-lead rope to his halter. The barn grew quiet, as if every creature inside understood the importance of this moment. Eleanor spoke softly. "It's a big day, Storm. Let's see a bit more of the world." She led him forward, step by step, her voice constant and soothing. Storm's legs wobbled, not just from weakness but from the uncertainty of stepping beyond his safe corner. Each stride was hesitant, his hooves scuffing against the concrete. But Eleanor's hand was steady, and her eyes never left his. Outside, the spring breeze rustled the wildflowers, beckoning. They emerged into the training paddock, a grassy, sun-dappled enclosure lined with white wooden rails. Cross poles and a handful of small logs lay scattered around, remnants of yesterday's riding lessons. Eleanor had made sure the space was clear and quiet, choosing the early hour for Storm's first taste of freedom. She unclipped the lead but stayed inside, ready to guide or comfort as needed. Storm stood stock still, nostrils flaring at the scents of earth and cut grass, ears pricked at distant birdsong. For a moment, he did nothing, only breathed, eyes wide as he tried to take it all in. The world was impossibly large, the sky impossibly bright. It seemed to overwhelm him. In the neighboring paddock, a spry Connemara pony named Trixie cantered over and whinnied, tossing her silver mane. Storm shied, his body tensing as if to bolt. But Trixie only flicked her tail, curious and playful. The other horses watched, their heads over the fence, silent witnesses to Storm's slow rebirth. Eleanor moved to the center of the ring and sat on the grass, giving Storm plenty of space. She pretended to ignore him, busying herself with a handful of wildflowers she picked. Time ticked by in quiet moments. Storm edged forward, drawn by the sight of the other horses and the gentle, reassuring presence of Eleanor. He sniffed at the grass, tasting the freshness. His eyes lingered on the crosspole, uncertainty mixing with longing. Suddenly, a gust of wind sent a paper cup tumbling across the paddock. Storm startled, jumping sideways. Eleanor resisted the urge to rush in. Instead, she spoke softly. "You're all right, Storm. It's just the wind." Minutes passed. Storm's breathing slowed. He glanced at Trixie, then at Eleanor, as if looking for permission. Slowly, he took another step. Trixie cantered off, leaping over a small crosspole with ease. Storm watched, muscles taut with both envy and fear. Then, in a moment that made Eleanor's heart leap, Storm lowered his head and sniffed a log lying in the grass. He circled it, unsure, his hooves tracing nervous patterns. He paused, studying the world as if weighing his own limits. Then, with a small, almost embarrassed effort, he lifted a hoof and stepped over the log. The gesture was simple, a single, trembling step. But it was everything. Eleanor smiled, biting back tears. She knew what it cost him to move past that invisible barrier. She applauded quietly, careful not to startle him. Storm looked at her, uncertain, then at the other horses. The sky seemed to open above him. For the first time, he took in the world not just with fear, but with possibility. Owen and Lisa watched from the fence, holding their breath. Even Mrs. Bright, usually busy with her checklists and chores, paused to take in the moment. "He's doing it," Owen whispered. "He's really doing it." Eleanor let the minutes stretch, letting Storm discover at his own pace. He moved a bit farther, pausing often, alert to every sound. Trixie circled back, approaching with a gentle curiosity. Storm tensed, but Trixie only offered a brief sniff, then trotted off to chase a butterfly. Eleanor saw Storm's muscles relax a fraction. She let him wander, always within the safety of the paddock, the sun warming his battered frame. He stepped over another log, then a low crosspole, each movement less hesitant than the last. There was no whip, no harsh word, only quiet encouragement and space to try, to fail, to try again. A robin landed on the fence, singing. Storm watched it, head cocked. The bird flitted away, and Storm followed it a few steps, curiosity slowly overtaking fear. By midday, Storm was sweating, tired but calm. Eleanor clipped the lead rope back on, offering him a piece of apple. "You did so well today. I'm proud of you," she murmured. Storm chewed the apple, eyes half closed in pleasure. She led him back to his stall, where he drank deeply and sank down into the shavings for a rare, restful nap. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Eleanor reflected on the progress. The steps had been small, but they meant the world. Healing, she knew, wasn't a straight line. Some days Storm would freeze at a shadow or shy from a sound, but each time he stepped forward, Each time he dared to touch the world with curiosity instead of fear, he reclaimed a piece of himself. Eleanor wrote notes in her journal, marking every milestone, every new gesture of trust. She included sketches of Storm as he stepped over obstacles, his posture transforming day by day from rigid anxiety to tentative hope. She sent a quick update to Anya. Storm took his first steps over a pole today. He's watching the others now. So much progress. Anya replied, I knew he could do it. Keep going. Every step counts. Over the next few days, the pattern held. Each morning, Eleanor brought Storm into the paddock. Sometimes he froze, paralyzed by old memories. Sometimes he retreated. But more and more he pushed through. He watched the other horses, ears flicking at their playful shouts, their leaps over poles. And every so often, he followed, awkward but brave, his legs slowly remembering what freedom felt like. The staff at Havenwood began to root for him in subtle ways, Owen leaving fresh flowers by his stall, Lisa sneaking him extra treats, Mrs. Bright lingering a moment longer with her gentle eyes. Storm didn't understand their words, but he felt their care. One afternoon, as a warm breeze swept the paddocks and the horses kicked up their heels in the sunshine, Storm surprised them all. He trotted up to a low crosspole, hesitated then, without anyone urging him, gathered himself and hopped over. It was clumsy, almost comical, but to Eleanor, it was beautiful. She clapped, not caring if she looked foolish. Look at you, Storm! You're flying! The other horses nickered approval. Storm snorted, tossing his head, pride flickering in his eyes. That night, Eleanor sat outside his stall, reading poetry by lamplight. Storm pressed his nose to her shoulder, accepting her touch at last. You did it, she whispered. And as the barn settled into the quiet hush of evening, Eleanor knew that today, Storm had taken his first real steps into freedom, steps toward a life where his past no longer held all the power. Sunlight poured through the wide windows of the Havenwood Stables training barn, dust motes swirling in golden shafts. The clatter of hooves echoed as Lisa led the excitable Trixie through her morning paces, weaving through jumps and cross rails with a practiced hand. But all eyes, as always, drifted toward the far end of the arena, where Storm and Eleanor worked in quiet harmony. Over the past weeks, Storm had transformed. The bones along his ribs were softening beneath a layer of healthy weight. His coat, brushed daily and glistening after warm baths, shone once more in the sunlight. Yet the biggest change wasn't physical. It was in his posture, his eyes, the gentle pride with which he now carried himself. Eleanor greeted Storm with a wide smile, her pockets filled with apple slices and a new kind of energy. Today she had raised the stakes. The simple logs and cross poles of the first weeks had been swapped out for more challenging obstacles. Brightly colored verticals and oxers stood in formation, some narrow, some tall, all ready for the brave and the bold. You're ready for this, Storm. I know you are. Storm stood at the gate, muscles twitching in anticipation. The morning's calm had settled over him, and there was a gleam in his eye, a curiosity that edged closer to excitement than fear. Owen leaned against the rails, camera in hand. You think he'll clear the big ones today? Owen asked. Eleanor grinned. He's a Clydesdale. He was born for this. She led Storm to the first jump, a simple vertical. He eyed it, head high, breath even. Eleanor gave him space, trusting in the bond they'd built. With a gentle click of her tongue, she asked him forward. Storm trotted up, hesitated, then with a burst of energy leapt over, clearing it with surprising grace. The barn erupted in cheers. Eleanor rubbed his neck. Good boy. See? You can do anything. The session continued, each obstacle a new challenge. Storm's confidence grew. He soared over oxers, broad painted rails that tested his strength, and verticals that stretched his reach. The other horses watched, some calling encouragement, others just curious. Eleanor guided him through a complex course, raising the height on each pass. She talked to him the whole time, her voice steady and full of pride. That's it. Take your time, buddy. Trust yourself. On the final approach, Storm gathered himself and launched over the tallest jump of the day. His landing was sure, hooves drumming the ground in a thunderous cadence. He tossed his head, eyes shining, mane flying. For a moment, he looked every inch the champion he was meant to be. Lisa whistled. I never thought I'd see the day. He looks like he's done this forever. Mrs. Bright, who watched from the tack room, nodded with satisfaction. He's showing what real care can do, she said quietly, almost to herself. As Eleanor cooled Storm down, walking him in slow circles, she marveled at his transformation. She remembered that first desperate day, the broken horse who had flinched from her shadow. Now Storm moved beside her like a partner, each step measured and strong. Later, as she brushed him down in the stable yard, Eleanor spoke to him as if he could answer. You have the heart of a champion, Storm. I wish everyone could see you like I do. She ran her fingers along his mane, feeling the powerful muscles beneath his coat. That afternoon, while cleaning her office, Eleanor spotted a flyer for the Village Charity Showjumping Event pinned to the notice board. It was a small local competition, open to all breeds, raising money for the community's animal rescue fund. A smile crept across her face. She found Mrs. Bright in the feed room. What do you think about entering Storm in the show-jumping event? Just a small local thing, but he's ready for a challenge. Mrs. Bright raised an eyebrow. You think he's up for that, after all he's been through? I do, Eleanor said, her voice firm. He needs something to aim for, and so do I. Mrs. Bright considered, then nodded. If you believe in him, then I do too. Let's show them what he can do. Eleanor spent the evening registering Storm, filling out forms and preparing his tack. She called Anya to share the news. He's going to compete, Anya. Can you believe it? Anya's laugh was warm and full of pride. Of course I can. I knew he had it in him. Just remember, win or lose, it's about the journey. Eleanor hung up, heart racing with anticipation. The coming days were a whirlwind of preparation, early morning workouts, careful nutrition, and endless encouragement. Owen designed a mock course in the field, using every odd bit of fencing and colorful buckets he could find. Lisa made banners and brushed Storm's coat until it gleamed. Even Mrs. Bright sewed a special saddle pad with Storm's name stitched in neat, blue thread. Yet it wasn't all triumph. Some nights, Eleanor found Storm restless, pacing his stall, haunted by shadows only he could see. Sometimes a loud sound, a dropped bucket, a sudden shout, would send him trembling, eyes wide with old terror. Eleanor would sit with him, her hand steady on his neck, whispering the same words she had spoken from the very first night. You're safe. I'm here. She knew that healing was never a straight path. Storm's past could not be erased, only softened by the present. But with every day, the light in his eyes grew. He began to nicker when Eleanor approached, to nudge her pockets for treats, to follow her voice across the fields. The other horses sensed the change. He was no longer an outsider, but one of their own. The day before the competition, the entire team gathered in the paddock. Owen snapped photos of Storm in his polished bridle. Lisa braided his mane with blue ribbons, careful not to startle him. Mrs. Bright ran through the checklist, ticking off each item with pride. Eleanor knelt in the grass beside Storm, her heart pounding. "Tomorrow's the big day," she whispered. "No matter what happens, you've already won." As dusk fell over Havenwood, Eleanor sat by Storm's stall, pen in hand, writing in her journal. Today, Storm cleared every jump with confidence. He's taught us all what second chances look like. Tomorrow, we ride for hope, not trophies. She closed her notebook and smiled, watching Storm sleep, dreaming of green fields and sunlight. The stables were quiet, but anticipation buzzed in the air, a promise that Storm's greatest test and greatest triumph was just on the horizon. Night at Havenwood settled quietly, the only sounds the soft rustle of straw and the gentle whickering of horses at rest. The air was heavy, full of the sweet scent of hay, but underneath, a certain nervousness lingered. Tomorrow was the day of the Village Charity Showjumping Event, the first true test of everything Storm and Eleanor had worked for. Eleanor moved through her evening routine, double-checking tack, reviewing lists, and pausing often to watch Storm, who stood in his stall with an unusual tension rippling beneath his shiny coat. She finished tidying the barn and sat just outside Storm's stall, her notebook open, pen hovering over the page. She jotted down notes, feed times, last-minute reminders, words of encouragement. Every so often, her eyes drifted to Storm. He was pacing, his massive head bobbing, ears flicking back at every distant sound. He hadn't touched his hay since sunset. Eleanor set her notebook aside and approached with care. "Hey, big guy. Tomorrow's a big day, huh?" Storm halted, glancing over his shoulder. There was a wildness in his gaze she hadn't seen in weeks, a warning, a memory. Eleanor's heart squeezed. She recognized the signs, the restless shifting, the deep breaths, the need to move. Something old and deep was stirring. She decided to stay with him. She fetched an old blanket and settled herself on a hay bale just outside his stall, reading poetry aloud until the barn grew quiet. Storm circled his stall, finally settling down, but never fully relaxing. When the wind rattled the window panes, he flinched. A sudden bang, a bucket knocked over in the tack room by the wind, sent Storm bolting upright, eyes wide, body shaking. "It's okay," Eleanor said softly, but her words did little to soothe the panic. He circled, tail swishing, muscles tensed. It took almost an hour for him to calm down enough to eat. Eleanor remained at his side until long past midnight, rubbing his neck, humming softly. But when she finally drifted into a light sleep, her dreams were uneasy, full of distant thunder and the echo of hooves running from something unseen. At dawn, preparations for the competition began. The barn was abuzz. Lisa braided Storm's mane in Havenwood's blue ribbons. Owen loaded gear into the trailer. Mrs. Bright checked and rechecked paperwork. Storm seemed alert, but distracted, his head snapping up at every unusual noise. Eleanor spoke softly to him, trying to keep her own anxiety at bay. "We'll go slow," she promised, hand steady on his halter. "If it's too much, we stop. It's not about winning, it's about being together." The drive to the arena was uneventful, but Storm fidgeted in the trailer, kicking the walls every time a truck passed by or the road rumbled beneath him. When they arrived, the scene was chaos. A swirl of horses, trailers, barking dogs, and shouting children. The arena was crowded, banners snapping in the breeze, loudspeakers blaring updates, and the smell of fried food drifting on the air. Storm unloaded, muscles quivering, eyes darting at every sudden sound. Eleanor led him to a quiet spot behind the barn, away from the main arena, hoping to let him adjust before facing the crowds. Lisa brought water. Owen brushed stray dust from Storm's coat. Eleanor whispered encouragement. "You're safe, boy. Just breathe with me." But the past had a grip on Storm, tighter than ever. A sudden metallic clang, someone dropping a jump rail nearby, made Storm rear up, snorting in terror. Eleanor barely kept hold of the lead rope. "Whoa! Easy! Storm!" He spun in circles, eyes rolling white, sweat already darkening his neck. Eleanor looked at Lisa, concern plain on her face. "I think he's having a flashback," she whispered. "This is what Anya warned us about. Sometimes the brain can't tell the difference between now and then." Lisa nodded, hands shaking. "Should we take him home?" Eleanor watched Storm's chest heave, watched the way he stared at the world, as if expecting pain at every turn. She felt the weight of responsibility, a living creature's trust and terror balanced in her hands. "Let's give him a few minutes," she said quietly. "If it gets worse, we'll go. He comes first." She guided Storm in slow circles, speaking softly. After a while, his breathing slowed. He stopped, standing quietly, sides still heaving. She offered him an apple slice, and he took it, tentative but grateful. His ears flicked toward her voice, holding on to the familiar in the chaos. "That's it," she said, stroking his neck. "You're not alone." They moved toward the warm-up ring. The noise rose around them. Announcers, applause, the clang of jumps falling. Storm's stride was uncertain, but he followed Eleanor's lead, pressed close, seeking comfort. Other competitors glanced their way. Some recognized Storm, a rescue horse, the one everyone whispered about, the underdog with the haunted eyes. Eleanor ignored the stares. She knew Storm's real story, the courage behind each step. As they waited for their turn, a delivery truck pulled up behind the barn, backfiring with a sharp bang. Storm froze, then in a flash, bolted sideways, nearly toppling Eleanor. He pressed against the fence, breathing like he'd run a mile, trembling from nose to tail. Memories surged. Tight ropes, dark stalls, harsh voices, the sting of the whip. His mind spun back to the place where pain was everywhere and escape was the only hope. Eleanor felt her own heart race, panic threatening to rise. She closed her eyes, took a slow breath, and pressed her forehead gently to Storm's cheek. "I'm here. This is now. You're safe." She didn't rush him. She waited, heartbeat matching his, their fear mixing in the cold morning air. After what felt like forever, Storm's shivering slowed. He blinked, eyes clearing. He nudged Eleanor's shoulder, seeking the anchor he so desperately needed. Anya arrived just in time, rushing through the crowd, concern etched across her face. "I saw what happened. How is he?" "Shaken, but here," Eleanor replied. "I think the noise brought it all back." Anya nodded. "That's how trauma works. Even after all this progress, the old wounds are still there. You're doing everything right. But today is about trust. Not winning, not proving anything, just trust." Eleanor glanced at the arena, at the daunting course of bright jumps, the crowds, the chaos. Doubt gnawed at her. "Maybe I pushed him too fast," she whispered. "Maybe he's not ready." Anya put a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't push. You believed. And that's what matters. If you need to walk away, it's not failure. It's love." Eleanor looked at Storm, his huge body still trembling, but his gaze locked on hers. She saw fear, But she also saw hope, a glimmer, fragile but real. She turned to her team. "Let's try. If he tells me he can't, we'll stop. But I think he wants this as much as I do." Owen and Lisa nodded, pride and anxiety warring on their faces. As Eleanor led Storm toward the inn gate, the announcer called their names. The crowd hushed, curious. Whispers swirled. "That's the rescue horse. I heard he almost didn't make it." Eleanor mounted, her hands steady on the reins, her voice soft in Storm's ear. "We're in this together, one jump at a time." They entered the arena, the noise surging around them. Storm stiffened, but Eleanor breathed with him, each stride a battle against the storm inside. The first jump loomed ahead, bright, intimidating. Storm hesitated, muscles locking. Eleanor squeezed her legs, whispered, "Trust me, Storm. You can do this." With a shudder, he leapt, clearing the rail by inches. The crowd gasped, then cheered. Eleanor smiled through tears. "Good boy." The next few jumps passed in a blur, some smooth, some shaky. Then a loud crash in the stands sent Storm skittering sideways, panic flooding him. Eleanor steadied him, voice firm. "Stay with me. Just breathe." He hesitated, breathless. Then, against every fear, he moved forward, jumping the next fence, stronger now, the old terror beginning to break beneath the power of the present. By the final rail, both Storm and Eleanor were sweating, hearts pounding. But they were together, forging something unbreakable. As they exited the ring, applause rained down, not for a perfect round, but for a victory much harder won. Eleanor slid from the saddle, wrapping her arms around Storm's neck. "You did it. I'm so proud." Storm leaned into her, the weight of the past still there, but no longer all-powerful. In that moment, Eleanor knew this was their real triumph. Not trophies or ribbons, but the courage to face the storms inside and still step forward, together. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Thoroughbred Arena, bathing the sprawling grounds in a pale gold glow that shimmered against the crisp June air. Today wasn't just any day at Havenwood Stables. It was the day Storm would face the ultimate challenge. The Village Charity Showjumping Event was in full swing, a cacophony of cheers, hoofbeats, and announcer calls reverberating throughout the arena. The atmosphere was electric, bristling with anticipation and nerves. Eleanor tightened the straps on Storm's saddle one last time, her fingers trembling ever so slightly despite years of experience. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves as she met Storm's gaze. The massive horse's ears flicked forward, nostrils flaring, muscles taut beneath his gleaming coat. Even with all the progress, she could still see the flicker of anxiety that never fully left his eyes. "You ready, boy?" Eleanor whispered, running her hand along his neck. Storm gave a small nicker in response, his breath warm against her palm. The crowd's murmur grew louder as competitors took their turns, each round adding to the mounting tension. Horses and riders navigated the course, a twisting labyrinth of brightly colored jumps, narrow turns, and intimidating oxers that would test every ounce of skill and courage. Eleanor felt the weight of expectation, not just from the crowd, but from the journey Storm had undertaken. This was more than a competition. It was a proving ground for their resilience. As they entered the staging area, Eleanor could feel Storm's body tighten. The noise from the arena, the music, the crowd, the sharp calls of officials seemed to press in on them. The other riders glanced over, some with admiration, others with skeptical curiosity. Rumors had spread about Storm, the rescue horse who had fought his way back from the brink. Some cheered softly, inspired by the underdog's story. Others whispered doubts, betting on whether he would crumble under pressure. Eleanor's heart pounded. She swallowed the rising tide of doubt and focused on the bond between her and Storm. This was their moment. Whatever happened, she knew she had given him a second chance at life, and together they would face whatever came next. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena speakers. Up next, Eleanor Vance and Storm, the Clydesdale with a story that's captured hearts across the county. A wave of applause and cheers swept over them, stirring both pride and nerves. Eleanor took a deep breath and guided Storm toward the entrance gate. His steps were careful but steady. The roar of the crowd softened into a dull buzz as her focus narrowed. She whispered gently, "One jump at a time. We've got this." As they stepped into the arena, the bright sunlight dazzled Storm's eyes. The horses that had been waiting nervously in the wings watched as he passed, some raising their heads in respect. The first jump was a modest vertical, a warm-up of sorts. Storm hesitated briefly, muscles coiling, but Eleanor's steady hand and soothing voice calmed him. With a powerful leap, he cleared the obstacle cleanly. A cheer erupted from the stands. "Good boy," Eleanor murmured, feeling a surge of relief. The next several jumps came in rapid succession, some higher, some wider, designed to test precision and timing. Eleanor felt Storm's confidence grow with each successful hurdle. His ears flicked forward, his breathing steady. But the arena was an unforgiving place, and the crowd's energy was a double-edged sword. A sudden loud shout from a vendor's stand startled Storm near the third oxer. His muscles tensed, and he narrowly missed, knocking down the rail. Eleanor felt the familiar surge of panic from their first competitions creeping back, but pressed on with quiet reassurance. "Stay with me, Storm," she whispered, tightening her grip. The course demanded tight turns and quick reflexes, forcing them into a rhythm that tested not only skill but trust. Eleanor's heart hammered as Storm soared over a tall vertical, landing solidly on the far side. The crowd's cheers swelled, and for a moment, the past pain seemed to fade. Then, halfway through the course, disaster struck. A sudden, sharp noise, the metallic clang of a fallen gate slammed shut nearby, echoed through the arena like a gunshot. Storm froze mid-stride, eyes wide with terror. His breathing quickened, nostrils flaring as memories flooded back. The cold, dark barn, the harsh voices, the sting of the whip. Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos, steady and calm, but urgent. "Storm, I'm right here. Breathe with me." But Storm bolted sideways, dragging Eleanor with him. The crowd gasped, some holding their breath. Eleanor struggled to regain control, her arms tight around the reins as Storm's muscles tensed, his panic evident in every tremble. Slowly, inch by agonizing inch, Eleanor coaxed him back toward the center of the arena. The seconds stretched like hours. Sweat beaded on her brow as she whispered soothing words, her own fear fighting for dominance with her determination. "Trust me, Storm. We can do this." The tension was unbearable, but Storm's panic began to ebb. His heavy breaths slowed, his body relaxed fractionally. Eleanor stroked his neck, whispering stories of green fields and open skies, reminding him of the life they'd built together. Gathering every ounce of courage, Storm faced the next jump. His leap was powerful, confident, a declaration that fear would not define him. The crowd erupted into applause, the sound washing over Eleanor like a wave. They pressed on, jumping each obstacle with growing strength and grace. Eleanor could feel Storm's heart racing, the battle between past trauma and present trust, playing out in every stride. As they approached the final jump, the largest oxer on the course, Eleanor felt a swell of pride. Storm's eyes locked onto the rails, muscles coiling like a spring. With a powerful burst, he launched into the air, clearing the jump with room to spare. They landed in unison, breathless and triumphant. The crowd rose to their feet, applause thunderous, whistles and cheers filling the arena. Eleanor slid from the saddle, tears streaming down her face, and wrapped her arms around Storm's massive neck. "You did it," she whispered, voice trembling. "You're a champion." Storm nuzzled her gently, his dark eyes soft and full of trust. That day, victory wasn't measured by ribbons or trophies. It was the courage to face fears, to trust again, and to run toward the future with a heart wide open. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, warm shadows over the thoroughbred arena as the final rounds of the Village Charity Showjumping Event unfolded. The day had been a roller coaster of emotions, moments of breathtaking triumph and harrowing fear. Now, under the glow of floodlights, Eleanor and Storm stood at the center of it all, hearts pounding in unison. The roar of the crowd was like a tidal wave, surrounding them, both thrilling and overwhelming. But Eleanor's focus was razor-sharp, centered entirely on Storm. His breath came in steady puffs, sweat soaking his coat, muscles tense but ready. Despite the chaos, there was a calm understanding between them, a silent promise that whatever happened next, they faced it together. As the announcer's voice rang out, calling their names for the final round, a hush fell over the spectators. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment that had captured so many hearts. The story of a once broken horse and the woman who refused to give up on him. Eleanor mounted carefully, her hands steady on the reins. Storm shifted beneath her, eyes wide but trusting. The course ahead was challenging. Tall verticals, wide oxers, and tricky combinations designed to test every skill, every ounce of courage. They started strong. Storm moved with surprising grace, soaring over the first few jumps cleanly, the crowd's cheers fueling his momentum. Eleanor's voice was a steady rhythm in his ear, guiding, encouraging. But then, halfway through the course, disaster struck. A sudden loud noise, a crashing set of bleachers collapsing in the far corner, shattered the moment. Storm's ears flattened, eyes wild with panic. He reared slightly, muscles coiling, body trembling with the ghost of old fears. Eleanor tightened her grip, whispering soothing words. "Stay with me, Storm. You're safe." The crowd gasped as Storm faltered, stumbling just before the next jump. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed he might bolt, abandon the course altogether. But Eleanor's steady hand and voice held him. Inch by inch, they moved forward. With a mighty leap, Storm cleared the obstacle, landing sure-footed. The crowd erupted in applause, some standing, tears shining in their eyes. Eleanor felt her own tears slip down her cheeks as she urged him on. The final jumps came in quick succession. Storm, fueled by trust and love, faced each one with determination. Their hearts beat as one, a testament to resilience and the power of healing. As they crossed the finish line, Eleanor slid from the saddle and wrapped her arms around Storm's neck, feeling the tremble of relief and pride in his muscles. The crowd roared, celebrating not just a competition, but a victory of spirit. That night, beneath a blanket of stars, Eleanor sat beside Storm's stall, her hand resting gently on his mane. She reflected on the journey, the scars, the fears, the moments of doubt and hope. Storm nudged her hand, a silent thank you, and in that quiet exchange, they both knew. The finish line was only the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with healing, love, and endless possibility. The sun rose gently over Havenwood Stables, filtering through the leaves and casting a warm glow over the bustling farmstead. In the weeks since the Village Charity Showjumping Event, Storm had become more than just a symbol of resilience. He had become a beacon of hope and healing for everyone who crossed Havenwood's gates. The stable was alive with energy. Volunteers scurried about, prepping stalls and caring for the horses. Visitors wandered the grounds, drawn by the stories of transformation that Eleanor shared openly and honestly. Children laughed as they learned to groom ponies, and adults found comfort in the quiet strength of the animals around them. Among the visitors was a young girl named Lily, shy and withdrawn, with eyes that held too many fears for someone so small. She was brought to Havenwood by her parents, seeking something beyond words, a balm for the invisible wounds she carried. Eleanor greeted the family warmly, her eyes soft with understanding. "Lily, this is Storm. He's been through a lot, just like you. Maybe you two can help each other heal." Lily approached slowly, watching Storm as he stood calmly in the paddock, the sun glinting off his glossy coat. With trembling fingers, she reached out, and Storm lowered his massive head, allowing her to touch his nose. The connection was immediate, a bridge between two souls battered but unbroken. As Eleanor spoke softly about Storm's journey, Lily's eyes brightened. She asked questions, her voice gaining strength. Storm's gentle nature and Eleanor's story became a living lesson, that pain could be overcome, that love could rebuild what was broken. The farm soon became a hub for therapy programs, welcoming children, veterans, and anyone seeking solace in the presence of healing animals. Storm, once a symbol of suffering, now embodied hope. Eleanor often stood at the edge of the paddocks, watching Storm interact with visitors, nuzzling hesitant hands, sharing quiet moments with those in need. She thought about the long road they had traveled, the nights filled with fear and uncertainty, and the courage it had taken to believe in a better tomorrow. In her journal, Eleanor wrote, "Storm taught me that healing is not a destination, but a journey. Each small step forward, each act of trust, builds a legacy of love and resilience that touches far beyond one life." The story of Storm's recovery spread, inspiring others to open their hearts and homes to animals in need. Donations flowed in, allowing Havenwood to expand its reach and care for more rescues. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blazed with color, Eleanor stood beside Storm. They watched Lily and other children play nearby, laughter filling the air. Storm nuzzled Eleanor's shoulder gently, a silent thank you for the life they had rebuilt together. Eleanor smiled, her heart full. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. "Together, we can make a difference." And as the stars emerged, shining brightly over Havenwood, the legacy of Storm and the power of unwavering belief illuminated the path forward, a beacon of hope in a world longing for healing. The sun was setting slowly over Havenwood Stables, bathing the sprawling fields in hues of amber and rose. The sky stretched vast and open, painted with streaks of gold and pink that seemed to promise a new dawn even as daylight faded. Eleanor stood by the wooden fence, leaning gently against the weathered rails, her eyes fixed on Storm grazing peacefully in the soft grass. The journey they had shared played through her mind like a cherished story, a tale of pain, courage, and the unyielding power of love. She remembered the first time she saw Storm, a broken silhouette in a shadowed stall, bones showing where flesh had long disappeared, eyes wide with terror and distrust. And now, here he was, strong and gentle, a living testament to what patience and kindness could achieve. Eleanor brushed a stray lock of hair from her face and sighed, a deep, peaceful breath. The legacy they had built was not one of grand trophies or accolades. It was far more profound. It was the legacy of second chances, of healing beyond scars seen and unseen. She walked slowly toward Storm, who lifted his head and nickered softly, his eyes warm and full of recognition. Eleanor reached out, fingers curling gently into his mane, feeling the steady thrum of his heart beneath her touch. "You've come so far, Storm," she whispered. "More than I ever dreamed possible." The air was still, except for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds settling in for night. Eleanor sat on the grass beside him, the earth cool beneath her palms. She thought about the countless hours spent sitting by his stall, reading poetry and stories, hoping her voice could build a bridge over the gulf of his fears. Her voice caught slightly as she spoke aloud. "Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud." The words were from a passage she had read often during their darkest days, a mantra that had carried her when hope felt fragile. Storm lowered his massive head, resting it gently on her shoulder. Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his trust, the strength in his stillness. She pulled out her journal, now thick with notes, sketches, and reflections. Flipping to a blank page, she began to write. The story of Storm is not just about a horse who was saved. It is about the saving of ourselves. How the act of caring for another being teaches us the deepest lessons of empathy, resilience, and hope. Every wound, every scar, becomes part of a tapestry of survival and transformation. A gentle breeze stirred the pages as Eleanor looked up, watching the sun sink lower, the sky deepening into twilight. The silhouettes of other horses dotted the pasture, their forms soft against the glowing horizon. Volunteers and visitors gathered nearby, sharing stories and laughter, their spirits lifted by the work done here. Storm shifted, his breath warm against Eleanor's cheek. "You are my heart," she said softly. In the weeks and months that followed, Havenwood Stables blossomed into a sanctuary for healing, a place where animals and people alike found solace, connection, and renewed purpose. Storm became a symbol of that mission, his story inspiring countless others to believe in second chances. Eleanor's work extended beyond the farm. She spoke at schools and community events, sharing Storm's journey and the message of compassion. Her words sparked movements of kindness, rippling outward like stones thrown into a still pond. Yet through it all, Eleanor remained grounded in the simple truth that had carried her through the darkest nights: love, patience, and faith in the possibility of change. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Eleanor stood once more by the fence, Storm beside her. The world around them was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of life breathing. She looked at Storm and smiled. "Our story isn't finished yet," she said. "There's more healing to do, more hearts to touch." Storm nuzzled her hand in response, as if promising to walk the path beside her, no matter where it led. And so, under the vast, endless sky, the legacy of love, tireless, patient, and unwavering, stretched forward into the future, a beacon for all who seek to heal and to hope.